Welcome to my channel, USA Battle Zone. Today, I bring you a story that will grip your heart, test your emotions, and remind you of the unseen battles fought not only on the field but also within the walls of justice. The room was heavy with tension. Inside the federal courtroom, the fluorescent lights glared down on a figure who should never have been in chains. Her name was Lieutenant Commander Sarah Callahan, a decorated Navy SEAL sniper, one of the very few women who had endured the brutal crucible of Bud's training, and the only one who had walked away with a silver star pinned to her chest after saving her brothers in arms during a nightmarish ambush in Afghanistan. Yet here she was handcuffed like a criminal, her uniform stripped of ribbons, her wrists bound in cold steel, her head held high despite the humiliation. The murmurs in the gallery were thick with disbelief. Reporters scribbled furiously, their cameras capturing the impossible image of a woman who had given everything for her country, now accused of a crime she swore she didn't commit. The charges were grave: unauthorized use of deadly force, conduct unbecoming of an officer, and the death of a foreign national during a covert operation. To the public, it was painted as murder. But to her teammates, it was survival. The bailiff pulled her forward, chains clinking with every step. She refused to bow her head. Even in disgrace, she carried herself like a warrior. Her dark hair was pulled back tight, her eyes sharp as the scope she once looked through, her presence unshakable. The prosecutor's voice rang through the courtroom, clinical and cold. "This woman," he declared, pointing at her as if she were a beast in a cage, "betrayed her oath, disobeyed orders, and took a life when diplomacy demanded restraint. She acted above the law. No uniform, no rank, no medal gives her that right." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The judge banged his gavel for silence. Sarah's defense attorney, a weary commander with lines of stress carved into his face, rose to speak. "With all due respect, she saved 6 American lives that night. 6 men who wouldn't be here today if she hadn't taken that shot. To call it murder is an insult to the very freedoms she bled to protect." But the judge seemed unmoved. The weight of politics loomed heavier than justice. As Sarah stood in silence, her heart pounded not from fear, but from fury. She had endured freezing surf torture, grueling runs through sand and mud, the loneliness of being the only woman in a brotherhood forged in suffering. She had fought for recognition, for acceptance, for the right to wear that trident on her chest. And now, after everything, her own country had chained her as if she were the enemy. Her gaze swept across the room. In the back row, she saw families of the men she had saved. Their eyes glistened with tears, silently pleading for someone to see the truth. But beside them sat politicians in suits, stone-faced, unmoved, treating her as nothing but a pawn in their game of power. The judge cleared his throat. "Lieutenant Commander Callahan, you will remain in custody until the verdict is delivered. This court will not tolerate vigilantes in uniform. You will be made an example." And that was when it happened. The double doors at the rear of the courtroom burst open. Every head turned. The bailiffs froze, unsure whether to stop the figure who entered. The room seemed to shrink as a tall man in dress white strode forward, his chest heavy with ribbons, his 4 stars gleaming under the light. It was Admiral James Hawthorne, commander of U.S. Special Operations Command, one of the most powerful men in the military. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The judge, usually so composed, faltered. The prosecutors' words died in his throat. Even the bailiffs who held Sarah's chains instinctively stepped back. The Admiral's presence was a storm rolling into the room, silent yet overwhelming. He didn't ask for permission to speak. He didn't need to. He stood before the court, his voice steady, cutting through the silence like a blade. "This woman," he began, gesturing toward Sarah, "is not a criminal. She is a warrior. She is the reason 6 families still have their sons, brothers, and fathers alive today. I sent her on that mission. The responsibility is mine, not hers." A wave of murmurs erupted. The judge pounded the gavel again. "Admiral Hawthorne, this is highly irregular." "No," the Admiral interrupted, his eyes narrowing, his voice rising. "What is irregular is parading one of our finest officers in chains while the true cowards sit comfortably behind desks. What is irregular is punishing the very people who protect you while you sleep at night." Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. She had never seen the Admiral so fierce, so unyielding. For years, he had been a distant figure, untouchable, yet now he stood in her defense, placing his entire reputation on the line. Lieutenant Commander Callahan did not pull that trigger out of vengeance, he continued. She pulled it because the man she killed was seconds away from detonating a vest that would have taken not only her team but dozens of innocent civilians. You call that murder, I call that heroism. The courtroom was no longer a place of law, it had become a battlefield of words, honor, and truth. The prosecutor tried to object, but his voice cracked under the Admiral's glare. Even the judge seemed to shrink in his robes, gripping his gavel with trembling hands. Slowly, Admiral Hawthorne walked toward Sarah. He stopped before her, his towering frame casting a shadow over the chains that bound her. His voice softened, meant for her ears alone though the entire court leaned in to hear. You carried the weight they never could, he said, and you will not carry it alone any longer. Then, in an act that stunned every soul in the room, he reached down and unshackled her himself. The bailiffs hesitated but did not dare intervene. The clink of chains falling to the floor echoed louder than any gavel strike. Sarah stood free. Her wrists bore the red marks of restraint, but her spirit soared. Tears welled in her eyes, though she fought to hold them back. She had faced gunfire, explosions, and the brutal crucible of war without flinching, yet this act of solidarity nearly broke her. The Admiral turned back to the judge. You can continue this farce of a trial if you wish. But know this: every SEAL, every Ranger, every Marine, and every soldier who has ever worn the uniform is watching. And they will not forget how you treated one of their own. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. The judge, pale and shaken, finally muttered, "Case dismissed." Gasps and cheers erupted from the gallery. Families wept. Reporters scrambled. But Sarah didn't hear any of it. She only felt the Admiral's hand on her shoulder, steady and firm, guiding her out of the courtroom and back into the light. Outside, the air was crisp, the sky painted with the orange glow of a setting sun. Freedom never felt so fragile, so precious. She inhaled deeply, feeling the weight lift from her chest. The Admiral spoke quietly as they walked. The world will always question warriors like you. They will never understand the choices made in the shadows to protect the light. But remember this, Callahan, you are not defined by their judgment. You are defined by the lives you saved. For the first time in months, Sarah allowed herself a small, weary smile. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. There would always be whispers, doubts, scars that no metal could heal. But she also knew she was not alone. The battle she fought in that courtroom was unlike any firefight in the desert, but she had survived it. Not because of bullets or bravery, but because of honor, loyalty, and the courage of those who refused to stay silent. That night, as she sat quietly on the steps of her home, the silver stars above reminded her of the one pinned to her chest, the one she earned not for killing, but for saving. She thought of her fallen brothers, of the families who still had their loved ones because she took that shot, and she whispered a silent promise: I will keep fighting. Not for glory, not for recognition, but for them. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that the Admiral's words would stay with her forever. Because sometimes, true battles are not fought with rifles or sniper scopes, but with truth, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between those who serve. So when you hear her story, remember this: not all heroes wear capes. Some wear chains, until someone brave enough breaks them. And that is the story of the female SEAL sniper who stood trial not for her failures, but for her courage. Thank you for watching USA Battle Zone. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the sacrifices made in silence, then I ask you, like, comment, and subscribe. Share this story so others may never forget. And as always, honor the brave, cherish the free, and remember, behind every medal lies a battle the world may never see.